Dragon's Dogma is almost indescribably awesome. There's no other game that I've played that so consistently delivers such immensely epic moments and a gameplay loop that hooks me as hard as this does. At the same time, just like the first game, it is also filled with jank. I have now done a very thorough playthrough of Dragon's Dogma 2, and I have a lot of thoughts that I want to put into this video. It may be kind of long, so I want to do a quick TLDR short breakdown of what I'm going to talk about to give you the basics. Let's start with the pros. Battling giant monsters in this game is as cool an experience as you're ever going to have in video games, period. The Vocation system, which is this game's character progression system, its leveling system, is about as fun as any character progression system I've seen in an RPG. The questing is majorly improved from the first game, and the world is extremely satisfying and fun to explore. Now, for the cons, the things that I think the game really could have done better. The story really fizzles out in the final act and is more or less a retread of the first game. There's not very many surprises here at all. And I'm talking about that both in the actual plot points, but also in the execution of the story. It's a little bit clumsy at times. The game is definitely lacking polish, although it's not quite as janky as the first game was. Luckily, for the most part, it's the funny kind of jank, not the game-breaking or frustrating kind of jank.
I long to learn more of the outside world, but Mother won't allow it. She's always telling me how dangerous it is beyond the palace walls. But that only makes me question her judgment all the more.
The PC version of the game also has some performance issues unless you have a very, very high-end machine. Now, as a third category here, I'll do a could go either way depending on who you are. It's not something I can for sure put into a pro or a con. This is the kind of thing that will depend on your personal taste as a player. The game has a couple of extremely brutal stretches with some pretty extreme spikes in difficulty. It is not in any way, shape, or form trying to be convenient for its players. It does not hold your hand. It does not try to help you figure out what to do, and it relies on you really putting some thought into how you approach playing it. I would not say it's a hard game, but it is one where you can't just button mash through it or just mindlessly progress from marker to marker. It also doesn't have strong character interactions. I know a lot of people who watch my channel are big JRPG fans, and I think for the most part, most JRPGs really strive to have a colorful cast of characters that have a lot of interaction and character growth and relationships, and this game is not attempting to do that at all. It's not a problem for me, because it's not what this game is even going for at all, so that's why I'm not putting it into the con. However, I do know that a lot of people look for that in the RPGs they play, and you're not going to find it here. Okay, real quick before I continue forward, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. There's been some controversy about microtransactions in this game, and I'm actually really glad I didn't release this video on the embargo date, because it gave me a chance to see some of this conversation online so that I can respond to that in the video rather than putting something up without knowing that this is the mindset people might be coming into the review with. Let's just put it this way. I received the game about 5 days before release and never even knew there were microtransactions in there at all. And the only reason I even noticed them after the release date is because I went to the PlayStation home screen and saw this little icon right here. So I clicked on that to look at what it was, promptly ignored it, went back to the game, and never thought about it again. The game's use of microtransactions is absolutely non-invasive. It will never come up while you are in the game and playing. Nothing is locked behind microtransactions. I've seen a lot of people saying fast travel is something that you can only have access to with microtransactions. This is completely untrue. Anything that you want to unlock or do or buy in the game, it is absolutely not needed whatsoever to purchase microtransactions with real-world money to make progress in the game. Okay, now that that is all out of the way, I think where I want to start is with the point that I made, that this game is not trying to be convenient at all for its players. I find this really, really refreshing in the modern age of AAA game development. Because for the most part, big budget games play it as safe as possible and try to be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. Because they want to make as much money as they can to compensate for these massive budgets that they put into these games now. And I respect Dragon's Dogma 2 a lot for taking some risks in how it approaches game design in that respect. Dragon's Dogma 2 does have fast travel. It has two methods of fast travel. You can use Rift Stones, which are kind of rare early on in the game and are very expensive, but by the end are no big deal to pay for when you need them, and can be found in a lot of chests and as rewards for a lot of quests throughout the game. So obtaining and using Rift Stones for fast travel seems like it's going to be a really rare or expensive thing to do at the beginning of the game, but by the end, it's no longer that way. However, in between the beginning and the end of the game, you can use ox carts to fast travel to towns that you have already visited before. They are extremely cheap and essentially do the same thing, except that every once in a while, you'll have to hop off the cart midway to your destination because it's been accosted by some enemies. You defeat them really quickly, get back on, and boom, you've reached your destination. So no, it's not like you're going to have to hoof it everywhere you go on foot. Fast travel is very accessible from very early on. And one thing that they've added to this game that wasn't in the first one is camping as a mechanic. And I cannot stress this enough, you need to be camping in this game. You really, really need to do it. Because I was using a thief class at the beginning of the game, I didn't want to carry a lot of stuff and overburden my character because I wanted my character to be light on his feet and as fast as possible. So I figured, I'm not going to use camping. I'll just, run past enemies and get to the destination I'm trying to reach. I am telling you, you do not want to do that. Take camping gear with you and give it to a pawn or something like that, because the game expects you to camp on your way to a destination. The reason why is because as you fight in Dragon's Dogma and as you take damage, your maximum health begins to decrease. Not your current health, but the maximum health starts to go down. The only way to fully restore your maximum health is to rest at an inn or at a campsite. The abstraction that I think they're going for here is that the more you're fighting and the more you're traveling, the more exhausted your character is becoming and is unable to fully recover until they've been able to rest. I really, really like this mechanic because it makes you actually plan your trips. You need to know exactly what you're bringing with you. You don't want to overburden certain characters because you're going to be picking up a lot of stuff on the way too. You'll need to sell that or store it for later so that you can upgrade equipment. So you can't bring too much with you, but you need to bring just enough restoratives to be able to get by, and camping gear just in case you really need to fully restore your health. There were several instances in this game where I thought I could do without camping gear and ended up getting into situations where I just could not progress. I had to go back to a former save because there was no way I was going to get by. There are some stretches, like I said earlier, that are extremely brutal. You will come across huge monster after huge monster, and sometimes multiple huge monsters at the same time, and they will continue to chase you, and you will have tons of other enemies surrounding you and bombarding you constantly. The game can be brutal in that sense, and so camping is an essential mechanic that they added to this that you need to take advantage of. You cannot ignore it. unless you want to have some really, really frustrating moments. Additionally, the game does not hold your hand with its questing. It really expects you to pay attention to what's going on, to talk to NPCs, to really investigate what's happening in order to figure out what to do. And I love that. For some people, this might be frustrating. You might get stuck and not know what to do next. That definitely happened to me a few times. But I didn't feel frustrated by it. I felt really, really excited that the game was not just putting a marker everywhere and telling me where to go and how to complete every single quest. I actually really like that, and I want to see more of that in RPGs. There's also a moment that happened to me that will take a minute to sort of explain in context. So in this game, your party consists of computer-controlled characters, fighters that you hire called pawns, which are essentially created by other players online, and you can sort of take them into your own game. It's the way that this game implements online interactivity. So every player creates their own character, but also a pawn, which is kind of like this human-like puppet that exists only to serve the Arisen, which is the main character's title. They're not really alive, so to speak, in the sense that regular humans are. I mean, the name implies what they are. They're just pawns in the hands of the Arisen. So a new thing that they added to this game is something called Dragon's Plague, which is a disease that can be contracted exclusively by pawns, and it's very, very difficult, nigh on impossible to detect it. There is a way to detect it, which I won't spoil, but it's very hard to detect it. And if it advances enough, the pawn will eventually transform into this dragon that will completely wipe out any NPC in the area. So this happened to me on my playthrough really, really late into the game. I was at the Rest Point village, and I went and rested at the inn, and when I woke up, all of the NPCs in the entire village were dead. And when I say dead, I don't mean like temporarily knocked out. I mean they were killed permanently because of this. That includes shopkeepers, that includes important NPCs who give quests, like quest givers, were killed permanently. And I was in the middle of a quest at the time that I could not finish because I could not access the NPC in that town anymore. Now, the game does provide a way for you to revive NPCs who have died using a consumable item called a wake stone. They're pretty rare, but at that late stage of the game, I had 14 wake stones, which is a lot. But the town has like 30 or 40 people in it. So I couldn't revive them all. I could only pick those who were the most important for my progress in the game to revive. But doing this was a huge pain in the butt. It really set me back on my progress towards completing that quest. I say all of this to give you a taste of the fact that this game is by no means concerned for your convenience as a player. The world is tough and brutal and difficult and filled with monsters and crazy things that can happen, and you have to adapt to it. You have to plan for it. You have to think about how you're going to progress through that. And I think that is a huge pro. That's a huge positive for me. But I can see how for some players who just want to relax and play a game, that could be very, very frustrating. So I wanted to put that into that sort of neither here nor there category for that reason. So now that that's out of the way, I want to talk about what the game does best. So let's start with combat. Combat in this game is just so insanely fun. You have your 4 face buttons. Square does a light attack, triangle does a heavy attack, circle sprints, and X jumps. R2 allows you to grab onto things, whether that's an enemy, like a giant monster. You can climb the bodies of these monsters to reach weak points and things like that. It's super, super cool. I cannot undersell how awesome this is. I think, for me, it goes all the way back to Shadow of the Colossus in 2005, when I played that for the first time. And I thought to myself, man, this is the coolest thing. I really hope we can get a game now where there's not like sort of a pre-designed way to climb this monster, but you can just grab onto it at any point and start climbing it. And I had to wait years before I finally played the first Dragon's Dogma in 2023. Of course, the game came out in 2012, but I didn't play it till 2023 to see that dream of mine fully realized. And it functions pretty much the same way in this game as it does in the first. So yeah, R2 grabs onto things as you're climbing, but also you can pick things up with that button. People, you can like tackle people or grapple with them or pick up large stones and whatnot. That's all handled with the R2 button. Now, if you press L1, all of your face buttons will change to vocation-specific abilities that you have unlocked with the class that you are currently in. And you can equip 4 of these at a time. There are much more than 4 abilities per class that you can unlock, but you can only equip 4 of them at a time. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much how combat works. You go between your light and heavy attacks, holding L1 to do your vocation-specific abilities with the 4 face buttons, and you just sort of watch what the enemies do. You avoid getting hit, or you block, or whatnot, and you try to take them down, exploit their weaknesses, whether that's elemental or if they have weak points on the body, and so forth. It's really simple and really easy to get into, but there's a lot of customization and experimentation that comes with this that is where it gets really, really fun. Because depending on the abilities and skills that you choose for the class that you're playing, you might play completely differently than I do, because I might choose a completely different set of abilities for my character that is the same class. And that is a good segue into the vocation system itself. The class changing is just so much fun in this game. For me, the most important part of an RPG is its character progression system. How do you level up and become stronger in the game? And this vocation system is one of my favorite that I've ever seen in any RPG. It is so much fun to unlock a new skill, see a little video of how that's supposed to work, then go out into the field and perform that and master it and see when it's the most optimal time to use that skill versus this one in this situation or in that one or against this type of enemy or against this one. Certain classes are much better against certain types of enemies than others. So on top of choosing your own class wisely, you need to choose wisely for your pawns as well. What other type of classes do you want to bring with you that supplement the weaknesses of your particular vocation? I could go on and on about this, but I think it's sufficient to say that this part of the game, the unlocking new classes, unlocking new abilities, and then going out and testing them, is for me the most fun aspect of Dragon's Dogma 2. I mentioned this in my review of the first game, but the abilities, and in particular some of the magic abilities of the sorcerer, are some of the coolest I have ever seen in a game. Some of these spells are just unbelievably sick, but I've seen them before. I played the first game. And for the most part, all of these classes that are carryovers from the first game play mostly identically. And I think that that will actually be disappointing for some people. I think I was expecting to see how they would take them a little bit further, how they would add more to that repertoire. But instead, they more or less play exactly how you would have played them in the first game. However, there is a new class in particular, the Magic Archer class, that is, just flat broken. It is so powerful. But it has some of the coolest skills ever, and I love it for it. Basically, it's an archer class that shoots like magic homing missiles at enemies, which is just a really, really cool concept. But they have some really cool applications for this, like when you're in close quarters, like in a cave or in a tunnel or something like that. There's this ability where you can fire this like array of magic missiles that just ricochet off all the walls and just take everybody out. It's crazy. You can like clear rooms before even stepping into them. It's completely broken, but I don't want them to fix it. It is just awesome. Also, it is easily the most powerful class in the game because you don't have to get close to enemies to just completely wreck them. I was really struggling with dragons, for instance, all the way up to being level like 55, 60 in that range. I was still struggling to beat them until I got the magic archer class. And then it was just absolutely a piece of cake. This class against a dragon is just an absolutely unfair fight. The dragon stands no chance whatsoever. So I guess to be fair, in response to my own point of criticism that I just made, while the carryover classes play basically exactly the same, and that was a little disappointing, they do at least add a couple of new classes that bring some pretty fresh ideas and new skills that were fun to experiment with. Whether you are wanting to be a super finesse, fast, sort of like evasive thief character that is very tactical in sort of the timing of how you hit your enemy, or whether you're an archer and you keep your distance and really target and pinpoint the weak spots on the enemies, or whether you're a sorcerer and you're using magic and exploiting the enemy's elemental weaknesses, or whether you're just a warrior who wants to bash skulls, and I mean like just absolutely fucking crush people's skulls. There is a play style for you. The world is also extremely well designed. As far as the choice of geography, the way that they construct dungeons and caves, it feels like you're just constantly discovering new things, and there are tons of great rewards for doing so. If you go out of your way to explore areas that look interesting, you're gonna find really cool stuff there. And there were so many times where I just stopped and sort of had to take in these beautiful landscapes. They're so varied, despite the fact that there's really only 2 or 3 types of terrain in the game. You have your mountainous forest terrain, you have your kind of valley plains terrain, and then you have this sort of desert terrain in Bakbatal. And I guess there's also a volcanic island, so maybe that's 4 different types of terrains. But you throw caves into there, and you just have all of these different landscapes that just look so great. They're so breathtaking a lot of times. To speak really quickly on the graphics, I'm not somebody who really cares at this point in my life about really high graphical fidelity. That's just not important to me. What's more important to me is really strong art direction. And despite the fact that these days I prefer more of a stylized approach to graphics, this game looks excellent. Not because it's the most impressive game in terms of its raw power, but because the designs are really, really good. Whether it's armor, whether it's scenery or landscape, whether it's architecture, whether it's art that appears in the game, there are so many times where I just stopped and had to kind of look around the environment and was so impressed by what I was seeing. Castle Vernworth, for instance, is one where I was just walking through it and was just in awe at multiple times inside of that location. It is absolutely beautiful. There's artwork on the walls that is super impressive and lore relevant. There are details in the tile on the floor or in the stained glass windows that are just immaculately done. It is super impressive visually, and I don't say that lightly. But when Dragon's Dogma is at its very, very best, is in the big monster fights. And there are so many to go around. I know for some people, it'll kind of get to a point where you're facing the same types of monsters many, many times, and that might be a little bit too repetitive for you, and I would understand that criticism. I think that that would be valid to say. For me, I didn't feel that way. And in fact, it almost just continued to ramp up based on what class I was using to fight that particular monster. It can be a totally different experience based on which vocation you're using. And that's why the game, I think, is as successful as it is in its combat. because each vocation plays completely differently from another. Each one has a totally different playstyle. And so while you're fighting the same monster, you are not fighting it in the same way if you're changing your vocation up. Last thing I wanted to touch on as far as what I really enjoyed with this game is the questing. It's excellent. Really, really, really excellent. Gone are the kill quests or fetch questing of the first game that are very MMO style. They do still have some escort missions, but not nearly as many, and I think they're executed better here. But for the most part, the quests tell little stories, and they're pretty strong for the most part. They're really engaging. They introduce you to new characters, new parts of the world. You get a lot of lore, a lot of understanding of how things work in this world. It's exactly the kind of questing that I think should become a standard for RPGs now. I think The Witcher 3 sort of set the bar, and there have been a lot of RPG franchises that have sort of failed to reach that. And while I think Dragon's Dogma's questing isn't quite as high quality as The Witcher 3's, it's much closer to that than it is to the really mundane kill and fetch questing that you get in a lot of big budget RPGs and open world games. You're not going around and just repeating the exact same type of quest over and over and over again, for instance. It's not like you have, 6 or 7 different quest types that have their own, indication or marker on the map, and you know exactly what kind of quest that's going to be, or that's going to be. You know what I'm talking about? A lot of, big open world games are designed like that. This is not designed like that at all. Each quest feels handcrafted and tells a little story that are, for the most part, like I said, pretty strong. And in addition to that, like I said earlier, it never handholds you through those quests. You really have to think about how to complete them. And for me, that is a huge plus. That is a huge win. Okay, so now that I've gone on and on about all the things that I really love about the game, I think it's only fair that we touch on a few areas that I really think it falls a little bit short. So I was expecting more from the main story. The first thing I noticed when I booted up the game was that the start screen does not have the full title of the game. It's not Dragon's Dogma 2. The 2 is not in there in the title on the title screen. It's just Dragon's Dogma. And I think that fact really paints the picture of what they were trying to do with this game. This is much less a sequel to Dragon's Dogma 1 and much more of a second go or a second attempt at the same concept. This game follows almost exactly the same plot beats in little different ways. But if you're just breaking down the structure of the story and just sort of plot beat by plot beat, it is almost exactly the same as the first game. It is similar in so many ways that I can't even count them. And just like the first game, there's a lot of really good lore there and a lot of really good world building. But it's kind of clumsy in the way that it goes about trying to deliver on its kind of central philosophical theme that it's exploring. And there is a really cool concept there. I think they could really do a lot more with that. But unfortunately, it's just not the focus of this game. And a lot of threads that seem like they're going somewhere earlier on kind of just fall off or aren't paid off. They set up characters as being really important, and then you'll have maybe 1 or 2 interactions in total with them in the whole game. But the game tries to play it off as if this character is extremely important to you or something. There's not a lot of development on a lot of really cool ideas. They kind of just sizzle out by the end, to the point where when I got to the end, I was actually surprised that I was at the end, because it was playing it up like, oh, here comes the final battle. But I was like, there's no way this is the final battle. There's way too many things they've set up that they haven't paid off yet. This must be some kind of fake out ending boss fight, but really it's going to do some kind of big twist in the story, and then we'll continue on. And I was very surprised to find out, no, that's actually the final boss. All of these loose ends are still out there. And to be fair, there is a lot of that that's filled in by really seeking out doing side quests, but there are definitely still a lot of things that are just not really paid off by the end. And I found that disappointing. I really, really felt like after what they did with the first game, it sort of established as a foundation that they could have gone further with it, and that doesn't really happen. Additionally, it's evident that the game is lacking some polish. Maybe they will patch some of this in the future, and I would definitely expect that they will patch some of the performance issues on PC, for instance. But there's no knowing for sure what they're going to do in terms of patching the game later or releasing a DLC or whatever plans they might have in the future. And as it currently stands at launch, I really think that the game is lacking polish, but it's also something that I understand based on how complex a game this is and how difficult it would be to bug test it. As a matter of fact, I'm actually surprised it runs as well as it does, given how much is going on all the time. Like, I can't stress enough that this is not the kind of open world game where you're just going to be running through empty fields for minutes at a time before you come across another enemy. You are constantly bombarded by fights, and not just fights against goblins and saurians and little things like that. I'm talking about like giant freaking monsters. I came across a stretch where I was fighting a chimera and a griffin at the same time. There was a stone giant on that path, 2 armored trolls. It's just giant fight after giant fight after giant fight. And it can be a bit fatiguing. It's almost too much at times. It almost needs a little bit more breathing room in between these big battles. I would actually want a little bit more of some empty space. If a lot of current open world games are a little bit too light on stuff to do in between these giant areas, Dragon's Dogma is a little too far on the other side of the spectrum. This stretch here was just freaking crazy. I was fighting a minotaur at the same time as a chimera. This was in the middle of the night, and this game is extremely dark at night, by the way, which is why you have to carry a lantern with you all the time, because you cannot see in the dark. But it's raining in this area, so my lantern goes out. So the only light I have is coming from the multitude of magical effects that are going off everywhere. Lightning spells and fire and glowing particles everywhere. That's the only light I have to see. And so when those lights go out, I cannot see anything. There are 2 giant monsters in this very small space that I'm trying to fight. I manage to kill them both. I turn around and walk maybe 30 feet, and there's another minotaur in the blackness that just comes out of nowhere and attacks me. I manage to kill that, and then I walk into a cave only maybe 50 yards further, and a freaking troll bursts out of the wall, and I have to fight that. I mean, that's the kind of thing you will encounter quite frequently in this game. It's literally insane and very overwhelming at times. So you're never going to be lacking something to do. You will always have a quest. You will always have monsters bombarding you. You will always have something going on, some landmark that you want to reach and explore. You'll be discovering things along the way, caves and treasure and just all kinds of stuff. You will never be bored in this game. There's never a span where there's not something to do. So because the game is so chaotic and complex, I'm actually kind of surprised it's not more buggy than it is. It actually runs surprisingly well, and there were relatively few really janky moments, but I definitely encountered some, like this fight against a dragon in Vernsworth that continued to get stuck on buildings and would just sit there and let me, like, crush its skull in with a warhammer. Or just, general kind of buggy things, characters kind of freaking out or, weird physics kind of things. But nothing at any point that was a barrier to my progress or game-breaking in some way. Nothing I encountered like that. It was all, like I said, the funny kind of jank and not the frustrating kind. Okay, so I want to really quickly go over the PC version of the game. I've only played about 7 hours so far, so I'm not super far in that version yet. But in my experience, it has not been bad in terms of performance. There's not been any crashes for me. There's not been any real hard dips in performance. There have been occasional sort of drops in the FPS, in, largely populated areas, or if there's a very complex spell with a lot of like visual effects going on the screen. And there's a lot of chaotic stuff going on the screen all the time. It almost makes it difficult to follow the action sometimes because it's just so freaking crazy. Anyway, there were only a few dips in performance, and for the most part, it's run pretty much just fine. There's been nothing there that has really made the game unplayable in any sense for me. But I just built a new PC a couple months ago. It's on the higher end. It's a really, really powerful PC. And I think for the most part, as far as the reports I've read about, bad performance in the game, it's for more like mid-level or lower end PCs. So I think that's something that you'll want to consider if you are wanting to get the PC version of this game. You'll probably want to wait until some of those performance issues are addressed. But for the most part, I think it looks really, really good and performs really well on my PC. So if you do have a higher end PC, I think you're pretty safe to go ahead and take the plunge if you're really wanting to play this. I think that just about covers everything that I wanted to say. To recap really quick, the game is just incredibly awesome. It is so much fun to play. This was one of my most anticipated games of the year, and it really delivered for me in the ways that matter the most for me. I do think it fell a little bit short in terms of its main story, and it's definitely really similar in a lot of ways that might for some people feel like they didn't push the envelope enough or evolve the game enough from the first game. And if that's the feeling that you have playing this, I think that's a completely valid criticism. But for me, it just delivers on the one thing that I think you really play the game for, which are these incredibly huge, epic fights against giant monsters. It just never gets old to fight them. It is so freaking cool. So I recommend Dragon's Dogma 2 wholeheartedly. I think it is an amazing game. It is exactly the kind of RPG that is my jam. With Dark Souls becoming as popular as it did and sort of breeding a subgenre in and of itself, right? The Soulsborne or the Souls-like game. I want to see a Dragon's Dogma-like subgenre. I want to see other developers take this foundation and sort of continue working from that. In other words, I want to see more games made in the same vein as Dragon's Dogma. Make it happen. I cannot get enough of this.